Welcome to the Sharpe Show. I'm so happy to have you with me this evening, a little bit past 7 p.m. on the East Coast, and I'm so happy you're joining me. Today, I have a very interesting guest. I have a guest who, for some of you libertarians, you're going to think, what can he be thinking? No. He is a very smart and savvy man who has some really good ideas. He is, believe it or not, an Austrian economist. He is a management consultant, and he's also a former army officer. And he's joined me today, the man himself, Gunther Fehlinger. Gunther Fehlinger, grüß Gott.
Thanks a lot. Grüß Gott. Yeah, thanks a lot for the invitation. Hello, America.
Of course, I'm very happy to have you here. You have, I think, three issues that I think are strongest with you right now, and that is the idea that you want NATO to expand.
Yes.
You want the EU to expand.
Yes.
And you would like Europe to adopt more the euro. Is that true?
Absolutely, 100%.
Well, my worry about that is we're having the war right now. Can I go to NATO first? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're having the war right now in Ukraine and Russia. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people believe that the reason why that war happened was because of NATO expansion. So isn't there going to be natural pushback to what you're saying? Because, hey, if we do what Gunther says, then we're going to have war with Russia. You must hear that.
Sure. But if we integrated Ukraine in NATO 5 years ago, we wouldn't have this war today.
But wouldn't Russia have then started the war 5 years ago instead of 2 years ago?
They were never in the possibility to attack NATO. Only our weakness, us not integrating Ukraine, has created this war. Because Russia is a very weak power, they can only attack innocent and weak countries in the periphery. They can never attack NATO because we are very strong and if we are united. We left Ukraine outside. It was like a victim outside in the cold and Russia could take it. So we lost about 500,000 people and all in all, it's now $2 trillion damage for the global economy, this war in 2 years, because of American weakness and our reluctance to enlarge NATO and not integrate Ukraine when it could be easily done 5 years ago.
So if you feel that we should have integrated Ukraine 5 years ago,
yes.
If that's true, why did America stop it? Oh, I'm assuming you're telling me, you believe that America stopped it.
Yes, absolutely. America is the prime power of the world today, and it will always be. I'm very much believing in American power, in American supremacy, in the global institution, and in responsibility for global governance. So you decided not to do it because, unfortunately, you are governed by people who are very hesitant and they want to cozy up to foreign dictators instead of confronting them. And why? Because it's the easier way to make business with Putin and then to confront him and to tell him this is the red line. And all your governments in the last 20 years, they have basically done the same. Let's be friendly and let's make some rapprochement, reset, appeasement, whatever you call it. And they have never confronted him and showed him the line.
Wait a minute, but haven't we, as Americans, right?
Yes.
Haven't we fought back against the Russians now? Aren't we sanctioning them? Haven't we been sanctioning them for years? Haven't we been, calling Putin a madman, calling him a murderer? Haven't we done that?
You had Bush in the White House, and he saw in the eyes of Putin, he saw the soul, he wanted to understand.
I remember that, yes. That was
You had
that,
Clinton and Obama in the White House. The first thing they did in the first term, you remember, a reset. The big red button, the reset with Lavrov, you remember it, Clinton?
Mm-hmm.
And then Obama, he was basically doing nothing. He was missing in action. He was like disappearing in the White House after 2012. When the Russians took Crimea and the Donbass. There was nobody in the White House, like Kevin alone at home. It was a total disaster.
So you think
Biden is a little bit better now. Trump was a disaster as well. Biden is at least pushing back a little bit, but unfortunately, the Democratic Party establishment is not supporting his line, and he is a little bit too old for the job. And he has done some things, yes, he pushed a bit back, but it's mini sanctions, it's mini armament of Ukraine. It's just 20% of what needs to be done to really push Russia back into their borders. And this is very regrettable, and it's very costly, because if you care as a libertarian for taxpayers' money, then this is the most expensive outcome we have at the moment.
So I guess why wouldn't somebody say, okay, look, America should not be the police of the world. America has its own problems, and we should deal with our own problems. And let the Europeans. Why don't the Germans and the French and the Polish? Why don't they throw money and troops and soldiers into Ukraine, and then they can stop Russia, and we're going to go fix our own problems.
But this is what you do. Obama, red line, Syria. You remember in 2013, he went to the Rose Garden and he said, I went and I saw, it's not the world's peace is not our mission. And he basically gave up the world leadership to whom? To Putin and to Xi from China. And, do you really want to live in such a world? The last 10 years were a disaster for the free world and for everybody in the world, yeah? Because we gave the keys to the city to Putin and Xi. And this is not really what we can do. It is leading to extremely costly wars. In Syria, we lost 500,000 people. In Ukraine, now 500,000 people. I mean, this is the result. And economically, it leads to decline. So if you don't manage the world, please, who else? The Russians?
Okay, so that's
the
your
Chinese?
point. Your point is, if we don't, your point is, if we don't, nobody will. That's the Russians or the Chinese
the
will.
bad guys. And the Europeans, unfortunately, I'm a European, we are unfortunately not capable to do it, yeah. It would be nice, Obama tried it. The Europeans should manage the European affairs. But unfortunately, we are not united enough. We are not strong enough. We are not economically, fiscally, and militarily able to do it. And it leads to the disaster that you ever have to come back anyhow. And the longer you wait to intervene, the more expensive it gets.
So in your view, America is going to intervene anyway, and we're just wasting our time. We should have already just done it already. We should have intervened years ago.
Exactly. Remember the First World War?
Yes.
America was neutral. You came at the end. You had to intervene at the end anyhow because it was such a disaster. Remember the Second World War? America was neutral until Pearl Harbor. Then you had to come and to spend 4 trillion. Remember, after World War II, basically, you were for 2 years, you were withdrawing for the world, disarming, and then you had to come back because the Soviets took everything, yeah, if you don't stop them. And then you had to invest 10 trillion euros for the Cold War to keep the world free. And then, okay, that was, I'm very grateful for all this, but you could draw some lesson. And the lesson basically is NATO, because you decided to stay in Europe, to arm us, to help us, and not to come back anytime again in major wars. And so we kept peace in Europe via NATO. And this is very important. So all libertarians, everybody who loves freedom must love NATO as well, because it's the force of peace. And without it, we would have major disasters to settle.
So then, if I'm clear, you see Russia as an actual enemy of the West.
Yes.
Okay, not everyone does. So I was asking. So you see them.
No, it's obvious. It was obvious in 2014. It was obvious in 2008. Yeah, it was. But who doesn't see it in 2022? First of all, the model is against us. They really suppress their own minorities, their own people. They kill the opposition leaders. They jail the opposition leaders. It's a brutal internal system. They are like the anti-West in a system. They're working globally against us. They are working in our societies. They fund extreme parties in the US, and they fund politicians and corrupt politicians in the US, in the UK, and they are like working globally against everything we stand for. And now they are militarily confronting us, because basically it's a military confrontation between the West and Russia happening in Ukraine today. And if that's not the enemy, I don't know what the term enemy means.
So do you believe, and let's walk down a fictitious road.
Yes.
The U.S. says, I'm done. We quit NATO. We walk away. We go, we're out. No more. We don't care about Ukraine. We don't care. We're going home. Whatever happens, happens. Assume that we do that. I don't think we will, but assume that we do. Do you believe that Russia would just keep going? Would they then invade Poland, then invade Germany? Do you think that? Or do you think they would do something else? What do you think Russia would do? What should we be afraid of when it comes to withdrawing?
You can, I don't say that Russia is not the Soviet Union. It's not so powerful as the Soviet Union. The
Right.
Soviet Union after Second World War was ready to take France and Italy as well. Of course, Russia doesn't have that power because it's only half the Soviet Union in terms of population. And also we are still more united. Even as a European Union, we would be able to defend Poland and other things to a certain extent. And also the Polish are very prepared.
Yes.
They will not let themselves be rolled over, because you see even the Ukrainians, to the big surprise of Putin, they were not falling on their back and saying, rape me.
Right.
No,
Right.
they were fighting back very hard, and they have invested their manpower and their blood very much in the defense of Kiev and of the whole country. And the Poles would do the same, and they are much better prepared. So this is not going to happen. But you know what, of course, the Russians can do? They can take parts of Ukraine when you don't supply the money and the weapons. And of course, and they can then also, the system will be similar like with Hungary, because then you always find some weaker prime minister who says, maybe, the Americans are no longer there to really be a partner. So maybe it's nice to cozy up to Russia because Putin is paying his way in, and he has always something to offer in terms of money.
Sure.
He knows that. And then you will see that over 3-4 years, the whole Western free system, which we have built over the last 80 years, will crumble. And then some Americans will say, maybe not a good idea to withdraw, and you will have to come back and to fight this kind of enemy alliance as well, as you have to do now reluctantly. You are fighting now in the Houthis in Yemen.
Yes.
You are supporting Israel against the Hamas, clearly, and you're supporting Ukraine, and all these things you didn't want to do. But the reality is, that the world is in complete disorder if you withdraw. So you anyhow have to come back, and that's what you're doing. And you will come back much more in the coming years, because with the challenge, you normally rise. And without America, we anyhow end in chaos.
It's funny. You have some friends here in the chat. Benjamin says, yes, Russia is planning on invading the Baltic states. I think he's on your side on that one.
Look, I'm a strong believer in NATO, and attacking NATO is a possibility. They can always test a little bit the metal. They think in Russia that Biden is old and America is weak, and they try to tease a little bit, the reaction. But they will not do a full-scale invasion, because ultimately, there is several political forces in the world history who have tested American metal in the last century, and they always failed. The Soviet Union, the Nazis, the Japanese, the Kaiser in Germany. So they know the history as well. So they will not go for a full-scale assault on NATO. But what they will do some divisive action, make some kind of covert operations, and always try to somehow divide the societies and spread unease and disunity in America. This is exactly what they're doing at the moment, by the way. And that's more effective for them than a full-scale assault.
So let me talk to my audience real quickly. If you're watching this show, do me a favor and you like it, please click the like button. The like button does matter. It's how we get past our algorithms. You know that, so help us out. If you're watching on Twitter, please retweet this right now. Just retweet it so other people can see it. Please do that. If you want your chat to get to the front, you can always super chat me if you're watching on YouTube. And please, if you are watching on YouTube, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, why would you not subscribe? Subscribe right now. Do it. It's important. Go ahead and subscribe if you would. You can also become a member if you want to by clicking join, so you can keep supporting the show every single month. That's always good. But no matter what you do, Gunther has been so good coming to us. Please follow him on Twitter. And that's his tweet right there. Gunther Fehlinger right there. If you can see it, it's also his YouTube is also in the description in both Facebook and on YouTube. So let me keep going if I could, Gunther. If I see where you're going with this, you're saying that you think that Russia will obviously be aggressive, but will not attack NATO. You don't think he will attack NATO.
No.
However, you think there is a connection between Russia and China? You think they are allies?
Yes, but
Why do you think they're allies?
a stronger connection is with Iran. Iran is the
Iran,
more
okay.
dangerous country because Iran is closer to Israel. Iran is closer to the Persian Gulf, obviously. And, they are very dangerous and they have the proxies, the Houthis and the Hamas. And this is, of course, orchestrated by the Russians. The Russians have asked the Iranians to do action against the American interest. And then came the Hamas, then came the Houthis, because it distracts your attention, your military power, your political attention, or your financial power. It is distracting the whole situation. The Chinese, I don't think the Chinese will be so silly to really start military action against Taiwan or anybody else, because they are a little bit, they've sealed themselves as a very serious power. So I don't think we have to expect military action from the Chinese against anybody. But the North Koreans are very dangerous. So here we have this possibility, North Korean escalation and further escalation with against Israel, against the shipping in the Red Sea, which is very important for world economy, and also in the Balkans, in Kosovo and Bosnia. This is another battlefield which the Russians can open against us, and I'm confident they will try to do that. Everything where they can attack us without attacking NATO, they will do. And it's, of course, very problematic, as you see the confused American politics now, because you are very difficult to focus on 2 or 3 wars in the world at the same time. That's not very American, and you are really now challenged, and that's what the Russians want to do.
Proxy wars is what you're talking about, basically, having proxy wars throughout the entire world, which I think
Yes.
America has been stuck many times in proxy wars, from Korea to Vietnam, right on and on and on. We've had so many of them. Iraq, Iran, not Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan. We've had proxy wars tons of times. I completely get that. Well, Mike says something interesting. He says Russia hates China and Iran, but all are aligned versus the US. North Korea is a puppet like Hezbollah and others. Do you think he's right, or do you think there is a love or connection between Russia and China?
No, the ultimate center of the anti-Western power is in Moscow, and they have a little bit of a strong superiority complex. So they don't love Iran, they don't love China. They are both afraid of them. They look down to Iran and they are afraid of China. This is the mentality. But they feel very superior to the West and to the others, and they think that they are the center of the world. And they have this tradition. Always remember, Putin is an educated KGB officer. His whole inner circle is absolute one by one people trained as the elite of the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union was a very powerful opponent and enemy of the United States during the Cold War, and they had a global agenda. The proxy wars of the Cold War were not coming by coincidence. They were coming because the Soviet Union was funding them, was organizing them, was intervening there, and they have this experience and exactly the same playbook they are doing today.
So the expansion of NATO and the growing of the EU is basically as a foil against the Russians and the Chinese.
Yes.
So
in Europe, we were... Please.
If we do this type of division, this type of decoupling, isn't that going to increase the odds of violence? Isn't that going to increase the odds of us having a bipolar world back to the Cold War, where we were almost ready to have nuclear war? Isn't that a natural connection?
There's 2 strategies. Either you are strong and your enemies are afraid of you, and then you reach out in a helping hand and you give them opportunities, or you are weak and your enemies exploit you. And we have the last 20 years, we have tried the weakness, the niceness, and we have been exploited very much, because China and Russia have been rising enormously in the last 20 years, especially China economically, but Russia, obviously, after the breakup of the Soviet Union, they were in chaos. And then the last 20 years, they have taken an important global power position again. So they exploit this weakness, which we gave, these opportunities we gave them. So I believe in deterrence. If we are strong and we set the rules and everybody can play the global economy, it's not to exclude anybody. We are not negative, yeah, but the rules of the game: don't touch our borders, yeah, don't wage war of aggressions and conquest, yeah.
But to be
These are
clear,
the rules.
though, you kind of want to blur borders within Europe. Like you would like a larger EU. You would like all of them to accept the euro, right? As the common currency. You like currency unification
Yes.
for better economics. Am I right?
Yes, I'm very much for better economics and for free market economics and for low
Sure.
taxes. Very good. But the situation is, the United States has one currency, the US dollar, and it works very well. We in Europe have one currency, the European Union. It's not as strong and powerful as the US dollar, but it's modeled after it, and it's basically on parity. And the idea is that we need a bigger market. As an economist, also everybody who loves the Austrian economy, we are a very fragmented market in Europe, and we are gradually getting more united, and that's why we can catch up with the Americans. Not very successfully. You are still much more successful because you have 340 million people united in one market, one currency, one regulatory system, and we in Europe don't have that. And the fact is, we were a divided continent from the start, yeah. And gradually, the Americans, after World War II, they said, this European mess, we cannot continue. You must now do some form of market unity. That's the European Union, and all these leftover countries from the Second World War, which were American occupied or liberated, you can call it as you want, they were put in NATO. And then gradually we saw this is working much better than the past was. And then we have, when the communism fell, or when the fascists in the south of Europe fell first in the 80s, then gradually all these countries have joined. And it's these countries who want to join. We are not expanding like an aggressive alliance, like greedy for new members. Actually, it's very much the contrary. It's only activists like me who are promoting this unity. In Europe, the rich countries would prefer to stay alone.
Part of NATO, right?
Sorry?
Austria is not a part of NATO.
Yeah, for example, it's one of the problems of the Cold War that we have not been able to join because we were occupied, liberated by the four Allied powers in the end of the war. And then we had the Soviet Union was only leaving if we choose neutrality, and we have not overcome that.
Got it. Okay.
We should please invite us. But
okay.
America is not inviting. You have to go. We have to. I try to convince the Austrian citizens, but after some decades of neutrality, they are used to be free riders, and so it's a comfortable position for a rich small country in the middle of Europe. But everybody in Europe should join NATO, because NATO is something for solidarity. Everybody pays in, everybody contributes, everybody gets to standards. And then in the case we need it, it's like an insurance policy that you prepare yourself to be in shape in case of war. And of course, we can deter with a strong position. We can deter war, because for never in the European history, we are now 75 years in NATO, never in the European history, this NATO part of Europe was so peaceful than in this long period. It's a historic achievement, NATO.
So would you be open to NATO expanding outside of Europe to eventually include maybe North Africa as an example, maybe eventually Eastern Europe, maybe even South America? Would you be open to it expanding?
I'm in principle for NATO to be the organization where free Europe, the free parts of Europe, and are connected with and allied with America and Canada. So that's the core of it, because the mission of NATO is to defend Europe from Russia. That's it. Yeah. But we are having this global partnership program, and Australia is there, and Japan. And we can, in the future, also intensify this global partnership. This is an option. When China gets more aggressive, I think that South Korea and some Japan, Australia, New Zealand, they are also allies of the US. Yeah? And we can, in a way, the global allies of the US and NATO can merge or can coordinate closer. If we need the automatic level of defense like we have it in NATO to some extent, I'm not sure. And, I'm actually open for Japan, Australia, and some countries, but they should be market democracies. We should not involve us with Turkey. That was a historic exemption, and there are some issues. So we can expand for Mexico, for example. It's an option. I'm not excluding that.
So let
But they
me
must be ready for that.
let me do two sides to this. Side number one, you said it's made to fight Russia.
Yes.
So let's assume again, I'm going into a magical world. Russia decides we don't like Putin anymore. They throw him out and they create a Russian democracy. They do that next year. A magical world, right? I know that's not going to happen now, but in my magical world, they do that. Putin says, I'm going to go leave. I'm going to go buy some land in Serbia and I'm going to go live on a villa the rest of my life. He goes and lives in a villa.
Good
and
luck.
The Russians decide to create a democracy. Would
That
there
would be
still
good.
be a need? Would there be a need for NATO anymore or no?
Look, I think it's a long-term and eternal need for NATO, because it's very, very useful if the free world countries, I call America and the West and the North Americans, we are united, because we are like in a chaotic world, we are like the beacon of security and stability. And if we are stable and secure, then we can export stability and security and prosperity as a role model, but also help other countries to develop as well. So to dissolve our unity, which we have, would be the most tragic mistake, because ultimately there is also people in America who don't like Europe, and there are Europeans who don't like America. So
Sure.
if we go in that way and we divide ourselves here, then we have much more problems down the road, and that would be historically a mistake. I think it's possible for
isn't there
Russia.
a?
Yes.
I want to cover two parts if I could. The other one is, isn't there an issue or a concern that as we begin to create NATO, as we have NATO, we have not done a very good job of exporting democracy or free markets very well. As a general rule, outside of NATO, we haven't done that good in many areas. We've dropped the ball, and we failed in the Middle East. We failed in most of sub-Saharan Africa. We failed in most of East Asia. I mean, there's some exceptions, but I mean, we've done a lot. I feel like we've done a lot more failing than we have succeeding. Am I wrong?
It's a question of perspective. But let's see, 30 years ago, we had the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact, the communist part. Half of Europe was divided. Now we have already 13 new countries in the European Union and about 12 in NATO. So these are countries. We integrated 100 million new Eastern Europeans in our structures as full citizens. Remember, this is a big thing. The Polish and the Baltics and the Bulgarians, they are EU citizens, same like me, or same like the Swedes. This is historically only once in history it has happened, when America has invited new states like Texas and Oklahoma. You got new states and new citizenships. It was also a quite controversial issue how to organize that. You remember that in the 19th century. So we have gotten from 15 countries to 28, now only 27, unfortunately, because of the UK. But 100 million new people. So you cannot say we have made, and they are quite good economically. These are prosperous people now, and this is a major success. Of course, it didn't work everywhere. Possible because we didn't have the institutions ready. We need also the institutions and the support mechanisms. We need to be faster with free trade agreements. America has only free trade agreements with 20 countries in the world. You're very reluctant to give market access. That's a problem, because with the market access comes also regulatory alignment. That means the countries will be improved in their legislative situation. This is very important economically. And this is a stability, and also the prosperity attached to the market access helps to foster a middle class, which is decisive for democracy. So we have not done very good on that one, because we were too protectionist, we were too much anti-market, and we didn't help them to integrate in the OECD, for example. So there was less incentives. But many countries in Africa have developed in the last year and last decades. They are much better. This is just the Russian meddling countries. It's the unstable countries where the Russians are having their mercenaries, and they are like loose cannons in the sub-Saharan Africa, killing leaders.
Aren't most African nations, sub-Saharan African nations, that are doing well, don't most of them feel like China is helping?
Yeah, okay. We also have to see China is a real competition. And China
Yeah.
is not just evil, because we have been a little bit lazy, making very complicated loans with the World Bank and IMF, a lot
Yes.
of difficulties, but we didn't come in as fast enough and as big enough as we should. By the end of the 90s, when the communism fell, or 91, when the Soviet Union fell, we should have come massively into Africa and say, here are the highways, here's the energy infrastructure, here's the water infrastructure. And we can do that as well. Now the Chinese come the last 15 years and say, here's the highways, here's the
Yes.
railways, here's the water energy. And it was not, you don't need to be Sherlock Holmes or a whisk kid that you know that Africa needs infrastructure. Why didn't we do it?
Absolutely. So I guess so. Your answer is we didn't do enough. All right.
Yes.
My worry is as we get bigger, as a general rule, when we get bigger, we get scarier, and people start getting worried, and people start being afraid, and people don't like when America is the big boy on the world, and then the Chinese get mad, and the Russians get mad, and people get upset. They don't like it. And so I do worry about that too. I do worry about us exploiting people with our war on drugs and bombing countries and put it in deciding that we know what's right in a given country and then punishing them if they don't do as we see fit. I do worry about that. Is this a crazy worry?
Yeah, first of all, you are already the biggest economy since 150 years. This is, and that you are the most important democracy, you will always be. It's not India, it's America, the biggest democracy. And that you are a role model for everybody in the world is also good. It would help that you don't elect some crazy people president from time to time. But,
We are a democracy, so we do get all types of people. That's true. Yes.
But the problem is not that others are jealous, because normally success creates jealousness. Yeah, it's logical that they feel that you are too big. Yeah, but that's not the problem. The problem is American protectionism and American anti-immigration xenophobia, because your success should make you generous, and unfortunately, your success makes you more egoistic. And when you, as America, don't create a free trade system that really works, yeah, when you blockade the World Trade Organization, you make only 20 FTAs with very small countries. You don't have even a free trade agreement with European Union, of all places. Yeah, then it means you want to get richer. You fuck the rest, basically. Sorry to my language. Yeah, but this is very good. Yeah, and you basically all your anti-immigration policy, that's really bad, because you show the world you don't allow your market. You are rich alone, and you don't allow the people to come. And then the people sit at home and say, we cannot send our children, we cannot send our goods. The Americans are getting richer every year. And then the injustice breeds. And as a lead democracy and as a lead economy of the world, you must be generous and you must be open. And in reality, you are. But your politics behaves like you would be invaded. And then, everybody says, they really hate us over there. And then they don't let us in, they don't let our goods in, and this creates a lot of resentment.
So, all right. So you think the U.S. should not only help expand NATO, but the U.S. should not only expand NATO, but the U.S. should support one currency, the euro, in Europe.
Yes, absolutely.
And the U.S. should actually be more open with its borders, more open with trade with the EU.
Absolutely. It's called free trade agreements. You must have more free trade agreements, yeah? With us, with everybody who is more or less a market democracy. We have it in the EU with 75 jurisdictions. You have only 22 or so. Yeah? This is not good enough. You must, of course, conclude free trade agreements with all Americas. Yeah, it was Bush. I like actually George Bush very much. He had a good thinking. Yeah, in many ways, he was trying it, and then everybody was saying free trade of the Americas. Oh no! And the steel workers and the farmers and everybody. Then basically what you have 20 years later, you have El Salvadorians and Guatemalans who are at your border. Because most of the people walking are not coming from Austria or from Ukraine or from whatever, Vietnam, because it's very far to walk from Pakistan to America. Impossible, actually. But it's very easy from Guatemala. And if Bush would have got his free trade agreement 20 years ago in Florida at the summit, we would have much different Central America, much richer South America, and you would have much less problems, because it's very good for you if other countries are rich as well, because they stay at home there and they get more prosperous, and they're good for your economy.
What I do worry about, one of the biggest issues that we had, or people worried about for the euro, and I'll move to the euro for this one.
Yes.
Is there were weaker economies within Europe, right? When Italy was struggling, when Greece was struggling, when Spain was struggling, didn't the Germans feel like, wait a minute, we don't want to carry this place. We don't want to carry everything. Didn't the Germans get upset? The Germans thought they were carrying the entire place, right?
Yes, everybody, it's also in America, you see California is very rich, Texas is very rich, New Jersey or New York are very rich. And then you have very poor states, like you have whatever in Alabama or others. And then, of course, there's a lot of imbalance in such a currency and political union of such a diversity, like a continent, like America is. And we are as well. We have, of course, poorer Southern Europeans and poorer Eastern Europeans. But in general, if you go, for example, and many Americans go with pleasure and as tourists to Italy or to Spain, you could use wonderful trains, wonderful highways. The infrastructure is first class there. The cities are beautiful, and it's not exactly poverty in Spain. Actually, the last time I was there were Ferraris in Madrid and Barcelona. So, of course, there's always in a union, you have a little bit, because we are a union of nation states. We are different. We have different languages. We have different histories. We have, of course, a lot of cultural differences and prejudices. We think the South is not working. The Southern Europeans think we are ex-Nazis, and it's like, and the Eastern Europeans think that we all don't like them, and it's complicated to unite the continent of 27 countries and potentially 36, 37, and so many languages and cultures. But we overcome that. And we need, of course, also mechanisms for equality. That means in America, the richer states, they have a federal budget, and the federal budget invests more in highways and in emergencies in the poorer countries, obviously, in the poorer parts of the US. And we have a little bit less. And so, because we are a little bit reluctant to give so much money, like the US government has about, I think, 24 of GDP you give to the national level, and then you can distribute it. We in Europe, we give only 1% to the European Union, and so it can only give a little bit towards the poorer countries. And so then what we did in the euro, basically, in the crisis, the central bank was buying a lot of state bonds from the poorer countries to keep them in the euro and to make solidarity like that. That was what many libertarians in Europe and in America weren't crazy for that. But the reality is, in an economic union, you have to have some redistributional factors. If you don't do it via a national government like the US, we do it now via the monetary system. Is it good? That's a big debate. But I can guarantee you the Southern Europeans and the Eastern Europeans have never lived as good as they live today in the European Union in terms of infrastructure, prosperity, opportunities, free movement, and all these very important assets. And, we can, of course, I'm very much active to call for lower taxes and more competitive Europe. And we could do much more, learn from America. We could learn so much from America. But given our difficult history, we definitely were never as rich as we are now.
So let me ask about I guess the biggest one is the UK, right? The UK, Brexit, leaving. In their view, the people who were okay with it or who wanted the UK to leave, they believed that the EU was hurting them. They thought it was hurting their currency. They thought it was hurting their culture by having too many Eastern Europeans come into their country. They thought it was hurting their economy by bringing cheap labor in, and they weren't getting jobs. They had a lot of complaints. Were those complaints valid?
No. No. And you see it now today when we have a majority in the UK again for returning. Because why? Because ultimately the European Union has this equality mechanism, and we have helped especially the poorer region. because in the UK, because the real interest in the United Kingdom is that you have, from the geography and history, a very, very rich London, Greater London area, which is about 600% of the EU average prosperity. And the rest in the north, 600 is by far the richest city in Europe, yeah, by far, 3 times more richer than Brussels or Paris, yeah. And then you have this north, you have basically not even a good infrastructure. You have no good railways, yeah, no good highways, yeah. You have people living in industrial slums and a lot of issues, yeah. And this is the injustice. And we have at least made some impact in that one and created some justice. But let me say, the UK will return to the EU. It will return. It is a quintessential European nation. As you see in the war, when the Russians attack us, it was the British who were even faster than the Americans to deliver weapons. They are the strongest one. And you know, when the American appease us, Biden is not giving the rockets, yeah, the British rockets are already destroying the Russian Black Sea Fleet, yeah, the Storm Shadows, yeah. The British are, when it's going to get tough, the British we can rely on. They are the #1 defense of freedom. They were in the Second World War, they are in the Cold War, and they are now again. And that's why everybody understands we must get them back. And also there they understand it. And let's never forget, in 2016, when the referendum was, it was our weakest moment. The Russians were strong, the Americans were absent, Obama was wherever he was, I don't know where he was, and the Russians have bombed Syria very hard, and then we had millions of people running towards Turkey, going into Europe, and it was an artificially created disaster by Russia, by Putin, in order to drive all these refugees into the European system. And the televisions was full of these millions of Syrians coming into Europe walking. And this was, of course, a panic reaction then that the British vote, look, Europe is in chaos, we have to run. And then this very close Brexit vote came, because never forget, it was only 52.5%. And when you see such an important constitutional question, in most constitutions you have, for example, in the US Senate, important votes have to be with 60 senators or so. Yeah?
Right.
And then we have, for example, 52% of the people said at that moment, run out of the EU, which was the biggest constitutional disaster for the UK ever. And it was a big win for Putin. And that's why he put so much money into that. Yeah? The funding of the campaign came from Russia, there's no doubt. And it was a big strategic victory for him to divide the West. And now we have to overcome that.
Is it your view, with all of this, and understand that we expanding NATO, EU, adopting the euro, it feels almost like it is first world versus second world tiering, right? So if you're in the first world, you get to kind of be in NATO, you get to use the dollar or the euro, right? You get to be together with the cool kids. The cool kids get to be here. If you're not so cool, you got to be over on this side or over here. Am I misunderstanding that?
Look, this is an important question about global justice, yeah. And here comes, you know, it's not the cool kids, you know, because we are simply in Europe. We have the most care we have to take for the Eastern Europeans, for the Polish, for the Ukrainians, for the Romanians. These are 200 million people, where we, as 450 million people, have our most care towards our fellow Europeans. This is our most important. And we have done most of it. Not in case of Ukraine and the Balkans, but we will do more. But now comes the global question, because you're asking for Africa, for Asia, and where we failed, where America failed, where Europe failed, yeah, we didn't make a decent offer to these countries how to develop after the end of the Cold War. We really said, okay, we won, let's go home, job done, communism defeated, rest, good luck. This is not how it can work. And the Russians in the last 20 years have built their BRICS network, their whole Shanghai network, and all these crazy hostile organizations where they spread their toxic venom globally. Yeah, and then they have said,
do you think,
you know,
BRICS is a toxic organization?
Toxic, yeah, must be dismantled.
Why isn't BRICS just a response to I don't know, NATO? Isn't this a response to America? Isn't it a response to the hegemony that the US dollar is?
No, there's nothing bad on the US dollars. That's very good because stable currency are very good for anybody in the world. And thanks to the US dollar, we have a stable reference currency. It's like the gold standard of the world. And everybody can play with that and base its investments and the calculation on that. So thanks for the US dollars. It's good for everybody in Russia, in China, in the world, everywhere. Of course, we need to build a better global economic system, which is more open as well for Africa and Asia mainly. Yeah? So where we can do that, we have the answer. Let's do free trade agreements, America, not just 20 with Oman and with El Salvador, but let's do more of them. Yeah, it's a normal thing. This is what we do in Europe. Yeah? Or let's expand the World Trade Organization and let's make it work again because it's a very good organization. America is boycotting the World Trade Organization since 2016. Yeah, also Biden is doing nothing for that. And then is also the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. This is like a global EU. It was built by America after the end of the war to fund the Marshall Plan and to organize everything and to bring standards. We could open that much faster. But we are very reluctant.
Let me bring some criticism in if I could.
Yes.
Joel says, did he say we should have acted like conquerors? So he's saying now that the Cold War is over, should we then have imposed our view upon the others or just allowed them to do as they see fit?
Larry, it's not our views, because some can accuse me of cultural arrogance. Yeah? But I say markets works, democracy works. It's mechanisms which we have fought for centuries to establish. Yeah? And then at the end of the Cold War, we have basically promoted anyhow markets and democracies, but not really convincingly enough, not actively enough, not with enough money. And then, of course, our enemies came with their concepts. So we must also be active. And first of all, I made the point already, we must build institutions and we must invite countries who want to join our institutions more actively. The OECD is very important.
Let me go back to what I think a lot of people are thinking. And it's not just America. I think it's in Europe too, which is there are many Europeans who are saying, we have our own problems. We have our own financial issues, our own immigration problems, our own political, problems. And in America, Karen says, here in America, we have colossal metropolitan decline, financial collapse, a literal wave of invasion on our southern border. And how can we defend the world when we're ignoring our own housekeeping? I think a lot of people feel the same way Karen feels. She's not alone. Many Americans feel exactly like that.
I follow the American debate and I understand any personal statement like this. I don't want to smile about it. Yeah? But, with all due respect, the fact is America is still by far the richest place in the world, and the GDP per capita in America is in illustrious heights. You are by far the richest big economy in the world. Yeah. So for anybody in the world to be born American is a big privilege, is a big opportunity, is amazing actually compared to any other place in the world, with exemption of Liechtenstein, maybe, or Switzerland.
Sure.
Or whatever, you are the son of the Sultan of Brunei. That's also good, yeah. But in general, it's really amazing country. I was just in April last year there. And, because I also watched Trump's inauguration speech about the burning cities and the disaster, I was in New York, and I was 20 years in New York as well, several times. And New York has been cleaned up. It's much nicer, much more what we call European, much more parks, less people on the street who are sleeping there, rough sleepers. And it looks really very nice, by the way. Yeah? So the idea that everything is breaking down, it seems to be, for my personal notification, a bit exaggerated. And the southern border, don't get me started.
If you look right now in New York City now, since the lockdowns of 2020 and 2021, since those lockdowns, the city has suffered tremendously. The city has a big homeless problem. It has a horrible migrant problem. We have shelters that are overflowing. We have drug use everywhere. The city is suffering right now. We have not got back to our tourist levels that we had from 4 or 5 years ago. We have not come back from our MTA. Our MTA used to do about over 5 million people per day. Now it's about 4. Our tourists is down by 5 to 10 million per year. The city is suffering now. It is.
I was in Times Square 92, and there was drug addicts and rough sleepers. You had to step over them. Huh?
Yep.
And now it is really very decent and looks very much like a rich global capital, which ultimately it is. It's a very diverse and international city. And that's, of course, not easy to manage, but it looks really fantastic. It's the best city in the world to be. And look, you have maybe some kind of box view in America, insider view, where you think everything could be better. I agree. But compared to any other place in the world, yeah, to live in Washington or
But
New York is
but
the best place
the
in the
issue
world.
is, we as Americans, we're
Mhm.
going to judge ourselves by ourselves, right? We're going to go look and say we should be better, or right? We're not going to judge ourselves by the Algerians, right? We don't judge ourselves to Algerians. We judge ourselves to our peers around us, right? That's how we judge ourselves. So I get your point, but I think people are worried, right? Charlemagne says, no, the dollar isn't good for everybody. It's good for Americans. That's what he says.
True. Yeah, it's not true, actually. Yeah. The dollar is good. In a global economy, you need one reference and one reference value. Like in the 19th century, it was the gold. Yeah. And now basically the US dollar is a global value reference for everybody, and a safe way to store and to invest and to do business with and to trade. So it's fantastic and it's good for everybody. Of course, it's the best for the United States. Yeah. You are, of course, having a privileged role in the world, but you also carry a lot of the defense burden for the world, and it goes hand in hand. If you are the global anchor state, yeah, if you are the defense of the markets and the defense of freedom, and this is your role in the world, it's like if when you are a father, you cannot choose not to be a father. You can run away from your obligations, but you're still a father.
So we're
And
the
you
father
have
now.
obligations.
Okay.
We're
the father now. I like that. Makes me feel good. We're the father.
It's simply a historical coincidence that the largest continent was unified in the 19th century by the historic things, and that you took such a big economic role and global anchor role with the First and Second World War, which we started and you fixed. And you are going to stay in that responsibility. To deny it leads to a lot of problems, and it is a disastrous way without you.
Casper says he's not a fan of NATO. Casper says that NATO brings war and destruction wherever NATO goes. He says they bombed Yugoslavia, destroyed Libya. He is not a fan of NATO. What would you say to someone who says, look, NATO has destroyed Yugoslavia, bombed Libya? What would you say to that person?
Look, first of all, NATO is really the force of peace in Europe. It has kept for the last 75, it was created 49. And since then, there was no war in NATO Europe. This is a big achievement because we had hundreds of thousands of, we had continuously war until NATO creation. So thanks America for keeping peace in this terrible continent, which Europe was until NATO was created. Then the second thing is, there was Yugoslavia. Do you want to live under a government which puts bombs on you? The thing in Yugoslavia was that Belgrade didn't like some of the ethnicities of its citizens because they didn't like Albanians. And then they started a military campaign, similar like Russia didn't like the Chechenians. Yeah? And so NATO was making this huge step to intervene to stop genocide. I mean, this is the most moral and most expensive thing you can do. And this was, of course, necessary because, and I'm as an Austrian, I was very much involved in these debates in the 90s. And, it was terrible. They killed 10,000 people, the state of their own citizens. Then NATO came and intervened, and it was absolutely justified to do it in Bosnia and in Kosovo. These were the only two NATO interventions where NATO as a force together shared assets and stopped the genocide of the Serbian Milosevic regime. In Libya, actually, it was not NATO.
Go ahead.
In Libya, it was not NATO. It was the French and the British who wanted to help the Libyan resistance. The Americans were extremely reluctant to intervene. Obama was again missing in action, and it was anyhow a chaotic form of intervention, but it was not a NATO intervention per se. And we should have actually done a NATO intervention because the whole problem started when we abandoned the mission. regime changed Gaddafi, supported the opposition, and then we didn't want to do anything there, and then chaos and civil wars erupted. So if you do something, you have to do it consistently.
So we have
and
to pay a lot of child support for our children. That's what Joel is saying. He doesn't want to pay child support. Okay.
That's another.
I understand that. But David has a valid point that I want to bring up too. And I think, again, a lot of Americans think this. David says, with respect, Gunther, you are far more well off than me. You have no right to tell me I must pay for the safety of Europeans when I'm unsafe in Baltimore City and I'm living paycheck to paycheck. He goes on to say, I'm not privileged. I'm a victim of the corporate elite who are wealthy. It's not fair to make Americans pay for the privilege of our overlords. And let me classify that, qualify that a bit. I think there are a lot of Americans who believe that the advantages that are being made by America are going to a select few and are not going to a lot of average America. I think many Americans believe this to be true.
Look, this is a bigger debate. You can also reform the United States of America. I remember Teddy Roosevelt introduced consumer protection and competition and antitrust policy 100 years ago. And for example, we in Europe, we live very much in the Teddy Roosevelt spirit. We love consumer protection. We love antitrust and competition rules. And you in America have done a little bit less of that recently in the last years. Yeah. So America needs also to reform its consumer protection and its standards for competitive, for the supervision of competition in the economy. This is all valid points. You can learn a lot from Europe, by the way, but we can learn a lot from you as well. So it would be really some exchange would helpful. But it's not that the Baltimore gentleman is paying for our security. I want to make that very clear. The Europeans are paying for their security as well. And also this, of course, America is having a global army, basically. And that's, of course, costly. You spend 3.5% of your GDP for that one. But it's Americans who are working in the army. It's an American world order which they are protecting. It's American who are benefiting to be the global economic anchor nation. And it's by far the richest country of the big economies with a GDP. I think it's about $80,000 per capita. I have to look the exact numbers, but it's about you are 1/3 richer than Europe on average. 60,000. 160, and we are 35 on average, to be correct with the numbers. But the situation is you are really much richer on average. And the only way to evaluate that is not how much Mr. Baltimore has in his pocket or me, but the only way to evaluate it is a GDP per capita in dollar terms. And you are 6 times richer than Russia and China. You are almost double the wealth of European Union. You have there's not a single European
I don't feel that every day, though. I'm with David. I don't feel that every day. I don't feel 6 times richer than Putin. I don't feel that. I don't feel that at all. Let me talk to my audience for a moment. Guys, if you're watching this show and you like it, please click the like button. I know I bug you about it because it does matter. Every like does matter. Please click it. If you're watching on Twitter, please retweet this. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It does matter. If you want to support this show on a monthly basis, you can. Become a member on YouTube. Click that join button to help me move this thing forward. Of course, please follow Gunther. Follow him on Twitter. Also, you can follow him on his YouTube page. You will see all of his information is on the YouTube page in the description and on the Facebook page. Please check it out and follow him. So Gunther, please, before we wrap this up, is there anything that I've missed? Something we should bring up that I have missed?
No, we have to support Ukraine, please. It's very important that this passes the US Senate and the House, this Ukraine funding bill. This is very important because we are now at the moment where Russia has prepared a 600-strong tank army to fight back before the presidential elections in March. And we are now entering the most important month of world history in the recent world history, where basically the future of Ukraine is at stake. Yeah. So if we win this...
So let me touch the Ukraine piece since you brought it. Let me bring up Ukraine. I know a lot of people are against the Ukraine war in America. A lot are.
Yeah, everybody in the world should be. Everybody should be against.
No, I mean against helping. I mean against helping. A lot of Americans. You see it. We are against helping. We do not want any of this. We do not want to help. You can see it. So the Americans are going to say, why should I put more money into Ukraine when the Russians are going to win anyway? It doesn't matter what we do. The Russians are going to win this thing. They're bigger than Ukraine. We don't want to send U.S. troops in there because I don't want U.S. troops dying. Why are we letting Ukrainians die when the Russians are going to win anyway? Let's just go home and fix our own problems. David's going to say, why can't we fix Baltimore? Why do we have to go to Ukraine? Right? It's a serious question.
Yes, let's fix Baltimore. There's nothing against it. Yeah. The US can, for example, introduce a little bit of higher taxation and you can fix Baltimore to the most beautiful city in the world. Yeah. But losing against Russia at the moment, yeah, is a recipe for global disaster. And you will pay a very high price for that. And I'm not talking about 63 billion euros, but I'm talking about trillions of euros in a global war where we have then to reconquer Ukraine and we have to defend the whole of the West. Yeah? And this is the most expensive thing. You will have to rearm nuclear and you have to also invest in a new Cold War if you don't win. And I remind you, the last Cold War was very long and very expensive. Yeah. So now Ukrainians.
But again, hold on. Earlier when we spoke, you said you believe that Russia will never invade NATO, that once it's NATO, we should be pretty safe. Russia's probably not going to invade NATO. You think that's what makes it safe. So if Poland and Estonia and all of those countries, if they're NATO, then it's only Ukraine we lose.
Yeah, it's a country.
Isn't that okay if we just we accept that we lost Ukraine? Sorry. Well, we lost Ukraine, but now we're safe because now everything else is NATO.
It's a country of 35 million euros, the people. So you give that up overnight, and what is happening? They're putting them into torture chambers and make a revenge campaign. Most Ukrainians will come to the European Union. Thank you very much. Yeah? We have already 5 million new people. You're complaining about few people from Guatemala. We have then 30 million Ukrainians sitting in the European Union. Okay, good. Yeah, that's not what we think is solidarity. But that's not the big point. Yeah, the global world, the world is watching what's happening. The world is watching. Yeah, if we give up Ukraine, yeah, what does it mean in China? What does it mean in India? What does it mean in Africa? We are the losers then. Our world order has been destroyed. Yeah, and our global reputation has been destroyed. Yeah. And you will see that there is a lot of other places, like in Israel, like in Yemen, where simply the next says, aggression pays off. Fine, let's invade the neighbor. Venezuela wants to take this Guyana. Okay, and so on and so on. And you will suddenly see one war after another. And you will be the ones who have to fight it, because ultimately we don't have a navy in Europe. Yeah? It will be American soldiers at line. And now the Ukrainians have destroyed about 2/3 of the Russian tank army already, 2/3 of the tanks, 6,000 tanks. The 400,000 Russian soldiers died in the Ukraine war already. Yeah, 400,000. Yeah, so they have basically defeated Ukraine in Russia in the last 2 years alone. Yeah, and now when you just give money, and of course it's a lot of money, I respect taxpayers' money, but given the global dimension of this conflict and what is at stake, yeah, this is ridiculous peanuts. And we gave a lot of money as well. You please give also money for this one and send your high technology. By the way, European taxpayers have paid hundreds of billions of euros of orders of American technology in the arms. Yeah, we buy your F-35, we buy your tanks, we buy all your machinery, and so on and so on and so on. It's not that you are just giving, and we are exploiting you. It's not exactly like that, yeah. But a global anchor economy, if you want to be the big boy in town, you also have to pay up and you have to take responsibility. And it always comes to haunt you if you dodge your responsibility at this moment.
If I can kind of get your view in general, if I could kind of sum it up.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Your view is America has basically, since World War II, by default, become a father of the modern economy, a father of the modern world order. And if America does not do its duty as father of this world order and of this economic world, then it's going to come back to bite it, and it's going to have to somehow fix it anyway because it's its responsibility, and it has to pay for it either now or later. Did I kind of get that right?
This is absolutely the truth. And you very much benefit from this world order as well. In all aspects, international trade, the markets you can sell your consumer goods, and also the dominance you have culturally, ideologically, and in all aspects. This is a huge benefit for the American economy and for the European economy and for the global economy, because ultimately we all depend on this openness of the global system, and you defend it and you anchor it, and you also have to contribute to it. And if you don't do that, that would be a terrible world to wake up later, and you will then have to fix it anyhow, and it will be 10 times more expensive, maybe 100 times more expensive later.
What's funny is Dave agrees with you. He says that's his fear. He agrees with you. He does that. That's his fear. I get what you're saying, but Gunther, I don't like it. I'm telling you the truth. I don't like it. I don't like the idea of us having to be this father, right? Because the way I look at it is we are now an empire. America's an empire. I don't like us being an empire. People would say we're a benevolent empire. Okay, but not everywhere we go are we benevolent. We have bombed lots of people, blown up lots of people, nuked people. We have done lots of things. We've tortured people. The American empire has done bad things. And I feel like that's what I don't like. That's the part of me that is bothered. And by the way, I was in the Marine Corps. So during the Cold War. And I remember believing that it was good to go off and fight and kill people because my leaders told me so. But I didn't know any better, to be full with you. I didn't know any better. And I might have been killing good people or bad people or any whatever. I would have been killing who my leaders told me to kill. And I worry that there are young men in America right now who would go off and do the same thing, they've done it in Iraq, they've done it in Afghanistan. And we spent trillions of dollars in Afghanistan, lost in Afghanistan, about 3,000 Americans died in Afghanistan and tens of thousands wounded, to replace the Taliban with a better Taliban. That's what we did. In Iraq, we were trying to stop Iran, and we made Iran stronger. We lost 7,000 Americans dead and probably at least tens of thousands wounded in Iraq. And what did we do? We made Iran stronger, who's supposed to be our enemy. We have not been good at this, I guess is what I'm saying. I mean, I agree with you when it comes to NATO. We have made NATO safer and strong. It's true. But now I look outside of that and I see a lot of death and destruction. And I see a lot of people who don't think we're a great benevolent empire. That's what I see. Am I wrong in this?
America is not an empire. An empire is based on territorial aggrandizement, and on control by the center. You have no territorial ambitions whatsoever for Canada, Mexico, or anywhere in the world. You have basically withdrawn from Libya. You have withdrawn from Afghanistan. You have withdrawn from Iraq. This is not what empires do. You are providing security in very fragile world, and always think what is the alternative to what you call empire. It's what we see now. Obama has basically been elected in 2009 on this withdrawal platform in 2008, and he has done this withdrawal. That was elected for that, and he did it, and it has ended in chaos and in a lot of bloodshed and in hundreds and thousands of people, millions actually, in Syria and in Ukraine dead. So if we need not an American empire, but we need an ultimate security provider for a fragile world. This is what you still do mostly, and you will come to learn that you have to do even more. This costs something, but there is nobody else there. Who you else? The Chileans, the Austrians, or the Russians and the Chinese. And the alternative world, which is run by the Russian and Chinese, is much more dangerous, much more brutal and much more bloody than the American world, which is run by you as ultimate security provider and anchor nation and the economy. And I agree, you can do many things better. Listen to the Europeans from time to time before you go to Iraq and Afghanistan. And also from time to time, maybe go faster out of these countries, like in the case of Afghanistan, because then it would also be better, actually. And also listen to some of the experts who know this country's history very well, because you are very naive people and very good. You're not naive, but you always are very positive about the world. You think everybody is a good guy. You meet him because every American, you are open, you say, how do you do? Let's do business, you're my friend. But the world is full of bad guys as well. And Russia and China, Iran, these are really very dangerous guys. And you have the assumption that every country is good, every person is good. You just have to talk a long time with them. And this is not the case. It's dangerous out there. And without you, it's a horrible world. Without America as the anchor power. And this is your responsibility, but you can learn a little bit more before you act. You can learn.
It's funny because listen. I know there are a lot of people, and one of the reasons why I wanted you on my show is a lot of my audience is thinking, no, we're an empire, it's bad. But I know there are a lot of people who think like you, who believe exactly what you believe, and a lot of people in this world, a lot of people in my own country, who believe exactly what you're saying. They believe 100%. I live in New York City, it's a diverse city, as you know. There are many people who would be like, yes, Gunther is 100% correct. Yes, yes, and yes. No doubt, yes, I think there are. And I'm glad you were able to come here and tell me what you feel honestly and take all my questions and go back and forth. I want to say thank you, Gunther, for coming. I appreciate it.
It was a very nice debate. Thanks for the invitation. Please be nice to Ukraine and please support Europe. We are your friends and partners, allies.
There we go. Everybody, if you like this show, please click that like button. It does matter. I know I keep telling you because you aren't doing it, so do it now, please. And also, please follow Gunther if you would. Follow him on Twitter. Follow him on YouTube. You can see what he's doing and what he's thinking, and you can see where his head is. I would appreciate it. Guys, I want to say thank you so much for this show this evening. Thank you so much for watching this evening. I will be back on tomorrow. I'm not sure with what, but I'll have something on tomorrow. I will see you all